Welcome back. So in the last video I showed you very quickly how to use the asset browser to apply a material directly to an object. Now we're going to continue on and create some more metallic materials in this video. So what I actually want to do is I want to go back to one of my previous files, this coarse materials blend. So you'll remember this is the blend file that's actually in my asset browser folder. This is where I want to create all my materials, so that they all appear within my asset browser. So this is essentially that base startup file with a material enabled. Now we have one object in our scene at the moment that's in our metals folder. It's this chrome material. We are going to, just for the moment, hide this folder. We're going to hide it from renders and from view. And we do have this ecosphere still in our scene, which also has this chrome material. I'm going to remove that material from this object. So what I want to do is let's just add a new material to this object. So this is an additional material. You can see just material. Again, we're going to create some metal materials, so we're going to turn metallic all the way up. In this case, let's put the roughness down a little bit so we're getting a little bit of a reflection there. So this is more like a kind of stainless steel type material where we're getting a decent amount of reflection, but it's still quite blurred. And let's look at another setting that can be really useful for certain types of metal, and that's anisotropic. So if I take this slider and I move it all the way up, what you'll see is we are stretching these highlights from our light. So what anisotropic does is it gives you a simulated effect of a kind of brushed metal. So if you've ever seen a kind of brushed aluminium or anything with a lot of really fine scratches and scrapes all going in the same direction, if you look at it at a certain angle, you start to see this stretched out highlight because the same highlight is being caught by a lot of different edges. You can also see this on vinyl records. Very common to see there. So this can give you the effect of a brushed metal look. Now anisotropic by default is going to just stretch out your highlights sideways like this. We can change the rotation of that. So for example, let's make it about 0.25, and that essentially makes these highlights stretch up and down. We could take this all the way around and you can see it just kind of spins around. If we have it at an angle, you start to see you get this effect. Now that might be what you're going for, maybe not. If we take the roughness down, you start to see that effect disappear almost completely. We still get our very sharp highlights there. Let's take that roughness up and you can start to see how that stretches out more and more until you get to essentially this point where you just get swirls on the surface. I want to make this fairly rough. I don't want much reflection in there, as you won't really get that much reflection on a brushed metal. I think about 0.32 would be good. In this case, let's take this rotation to 0.25. And this is going to be our brushed aluminum metal. You can see very, very quickly there, I think, yeah, 0.25 or thereabouts is a good starting point for that. So that's our second metal completed. Again, only took a couple of minutes. So we're going to use the same process that we used the last time. We're going to take this object, we're going to duplicate it. So I'm just going to use Shift D over here. And you can see what that does is it actually makes a copy of it. We are going to select this ecosphere. We're going to call this brushed alu for brushed aluminum. We're going to click and drag that into our metals folder. And again, we are going to go into our mesh or into our object, into our mesh, into our material. Now let's make sure we have named this material as well. Brushed aluminum. Right click, mark as asset. Save our file. And just as before, that will now show up in our asset browser. We can drag and drop it to objects. So again, let's create one more material while we're here. Let's grab this ecosphere again, remove that material from it, create a new material. Now this time I want to go again with another metal, and we've not changed the base colour in any of these. We've kept the base colour essentially just at close to white. And a lot of metals will have that really bright colour. Let's go for something a little bit darker this time. Let's go for something that's around about mid-grey. So about 0.2 in our value. Let's decrease this roughness a little bit. And now we're getting this kind of darker colour, this kind of dark steel colour. Again, roughness about 0.25. I think I'm happy with that. I don't want any anisotropic. You can see that we could use that anisotropic again, but it's not really giving us much of a different feel compared to the brushed aluminum. I just want this to be a darker metal. So 0.25. Actually, maybe let's go down to about 0.17. So something a little bit shinier. Could be used for a gunmetal or something like that. Again, let's just call this, call this dark metal. Again, we're going to duplicate this object, Shift D, right click, so it stays in the same place. We're going to call this dark metal. Drag this down into our metals folder, open that up, find our metal material, right click, mark as asset. So now that we've added our metallic material to our asset browser, let's remind ourselves why we're doing that and how useful the asset browser can actually be. So I'm going to add a new object to this blank scene. It's going to be the Cezanne monkey head. Let's just zoom in a little bit on that. We'll change over to material preview mode. And I'll add a couple of subdivisions using a hotkey, Control and 2. And I'll smooth shade that object. Now, since we don't have any other objects in the scene, let's just replace this outliner with an asset browser window. Now you can see I have several materials and objects in there, along with some of the defaults that come with Blender. I'll go to this all drop down and change it to just materials. And you can see that I've worked on quite a few materials throughout this course. I'm going to take this chrome material and just drag it and drop it right on our object. And you can see that will immediately update. And that looks pretty good on our object. Let's take one of these other ones, gold. Drop that on the object. Try this dark metal shader. And you can see just how quick and easy it is to take materials that you've created before and just drag them directly onto objects in brand new scenes without having to worry about linking or appending or duplicating in other objects or assets from other scenes. It's just click and drag. Okay, so it's challenge time. Your challenge in this video is to try and create a gold shader. So you're going to be using quite a few of the settings we've already looked at, primarily metallic and roughness, but you'll also have to find a good diffuse colour for your gold shader. Now, once you've created your shader, name your material correctly and mark it as an asset. And if you want, you can also create a new file and just make sure you can access your material library from the asset browser and just drag and drop that material to a new sphere or default cube, anything you want. So pause the video, have a go at that, and join me in a moment and I'll show you how I created my gold material. Okay, so I've decided to create a gold material. So I've got my object selected. I'm going to add a new material. I'm just going to immediately just call this gold so I don't forget to do that. We'll turn metallic all the way up and we'll turn roughness down quite a bit, maybe to about 0.08, maybe 0.01. So the main thing that we have to change here is the base colour. So what colour is gold? So we can click on our colour picker and we could just try and choose a colour of gold. We could try and get this right. But will we get it exact? Will it be yellow enough? Will it be orange enough? Will it be saturated enough? So I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here. I think this gold looks okay, but what we can do is we can actually use the internet as reference. This is a really good way of finding out information. So I'm actually on Wikipedia here and I've looked up gold as the colour. And this is really great because what we have here is we have X values, RGB values, HSV values for gold. So let's go with this metallic gold colour here. So what I want to do is I want to make a note of these values. So we have 46, 7483. So let's go into base color. Now at the moment these values are set to 0 to 1, and obviously we have percentages down here, so let's see if we can transfer these across. So hue 46 degrees, so let's try 0.46. So we know that's not right. So let's try something else. Let's try the hex triplet instead. So let's copy and paste this. Go to base color and let's just type this straight into the hex values. Okay, and that's much better. So it looks like the hex value is the way to go there. So one little note about that is in our RGB values, we have 0 to 1 numbers in here. Traditionally, RGB values are 0 to 255. So because we have these different values here, this can be a little bit tricky to work with. The same with HSV. You can see that on this setup here, we have the degree for the hue and the color wheel. We have percentages for saturation and for value. Now, saturation and value might actually work as percentages because we can just do 0 point and then whatever the percentage is, but the hue doesn't work. So stick with hex where you can. Now, maybe we want to take the roughness down, maybe we want to take the roughness up. So we have our metallic gold saved. So let's duplicate that again. So we're going to use Shift D, and you can see on the outliner, we get a new object. I'm going to right click so we don't move that across. So we have this second object. We're going to call this gold. We'll drag this down into our metals folder. We'll open up this, we'll open up the mesh, we'll grab our gold material, right click, and we're going to mark that as an asset. So no matter what material you came up with, I'm sure it's going to be a material that you can use in the next section of the course, where we're going to start adding things like surface imperfections, different roughness maps, different normal maps, and a whole lot of other goodies that are going to make our materials look even more realistic. So join me in the next video and we're going to start looking at glossy materials.